What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, and we have a very special NFL playoff preview, and I'm joined by a very special guest, the legend of CTB, Catch the Blitz. We've got Thomas. What's going on, my man?
What's going on, Mitch? Hey, pretty bold of you to bring me on after my Dolphins just took down your New England Patriots. But hey, you're in the playoffs. We're going to be talking about your team today. My team's not going to get any sort of light here. So hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to dive into what I think is maybe the most intriguing playoff in
Yeah.
recent memory. So it should be fun. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining, man. And yeah, you're right. I mean, the Dolphins, man. But then they made me feel better when they fired Brian Flores. We talked about that already, and I know how I feel about it. You feel maybe a little bit more optimistic than myself, but let's be optimistic about the playoffs this year, and I think it's going to be, like you said, kind of intriguing and insanity because I don't know what's going to happen. So in this video, Thomas and I are going to break down every team in the playoffs. We're not really going to break down like the first round matchups or anything like that. We'll probably get into obviously who plays who a little bit, but more so break down each team, how they made it here, what's special about them, what's maybe not so special about them, the X factors about the team. If they make a run, what's the best and worst matchups they could face. So make sure you guys do Gronk spike that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And with Thomas, Catch the Blitz, big Instagram brand over there. You guys got a great following. Put out incredible graphics that I know you have a hand on. So why don't you plug yourself and let the people know where you're at?
Yeah, if you're looking for NFL content on Instagram, make sure to head over to @CatchTheBlitz. Drop us a follow, especially throughout the playoff time. We're really kicking it into an extra gear here, and as well YouTube. You know, we're no bottom line view on YouTube, but we are starting. We do run a couple podcasts on there and post the odd video. So head over there as well. And yeah.
Yeah, talking about the podcast, I've been a big fan of the podcast. You guys started that this season. I've been a real big fan of the discussion on there. I think the set looks very nice. You guys are professional, so that's very cool.
Yeah, thank you. Trying to make it big over here, and yeah, the Super Bowl, the playoffs, it's all going to be great, and so make sure to tune in over there.
Let's begin with, we'll start in where we're more familiar, I guess. That's the AFC, with your Miami Dolphins not making the playoffs this year.
Yes.
I just like to give you a little jab there after sweeping us this season. Let's begin with the number one seed, and that is the Tennessee Titans. I don't think I thought I was going to say that at the beginning of the season. The Tennessee Titans are the number one seed, and they've had an interesting journey, Thomas, because in the offseason, they were one of the few teams who you could say, and I believe there are about 5 to 7 teams every year that are trying to win a Super Bowl. The Tennessee Titans are one of those teams because what did they do in the offseason? They traded for Julio Jones. They made it clear that they were going for a Super Bowl, and they backed it up by getting the number one seed despite missing Derrick Henry for a good portion of the season. But what's so intriguing about this team, I believe, is that they really did a good job of beating their top competition. They beat the Chiefs. They beat the Bills, and they went on a nice run here during the season. Now they had a little bit of a low point at figuring out what their team and our identity was without A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, which is difficult. But what do you think about this team? Do you think that they're a number one seed that warrants some backing and warrants some optimism, or are they maybe a fraud?
I think you should absolutely be scared of the Tennessee Titans, and I think this is a team that often flies under the radar. But you're right, they are a bit of a peculiar case because if you look at how their season went, first of all, going into the season, I think a lot of people approached them a little bit hesitant just because they thought, okay, eventually Derrick Henry is going to wear. You can't give him the ball that many times, and he's just going to maintain that healthy player and healthy season that we've come to know. And that did happen. He did get hurt. But once he got hurt, I think they showed us that they still, they are no joke. And I specifically remember that beatdown that they gave the Rams on Sunday Night Football, and that was their first game without Derrick Henry. And I think
Hmm.
that was a game that kind of opened my eyes and said, hey, like this team can play with the best of them, even without Derrick Henry. They now get him back. They have AJ Brown healthy. We know how good they are with him versus without him. But I think the reason why this team's often overlooked is because of their quarterback Ryan Tannehill. He's not the star
Right.
player. He's not a Joe Burrow who can throw for 5 touchdowns. He's not Patrick Mahomes with any flashy throws, but he does everything that they ask him to do, and he does it very, very effectively. He's phenomenal in play action. He can roll out of the pocket. He's sneaky athletic, and I just think that Tennessee, the way in which they play, especially because they've had success against the league's best, honestly, they're a good matchup for pretty much anyone. Like, especially, I watched them a couple weeks ago, and they just gave my Dolphins a beat down of a lifetime. The way that they run the ball
Yeah.
on first down, especially the fact that they're always setting up their offense with like a 2nd and 3, a second, just manageable situations. The way that they dominate the clock is something that is just very impressive and scary. And if they stick to their script, I don't care if you have a Patrick Mahomes on the other sideline or a Joe Burrow, like they're going to make it very tough on you.
I think many would argue that Mike Vrabel is the coach of the year, and he has brought that Patriot dynasty years when he played, the 03, 04 vibes of those teams, of the toughness and the edge and the underdog mentality. He's brought that to the Tennessee Titans, I believe. And you see it in the way that they play. They play physical. And I think that's what you're alluding to, is like when they play a Chiefs, when they play a Bills, they're going to punch you straight in the face. And can you take that punch? Because there are certain teams in the AFC that I think aren't built that way. The top dogs, other than the Titans, are not built that way, to be honest with you. It would actually be the team like the Patriots that beat them this year that would be one of the only teams that could go toe-to-toe with that physicality. But the element of also having the elite talent of the Derrick Henry coming back, of the A.J. Brown, the game breakers, is what separates them possibly from a team like the Patriots, who are more of a wild card contender. So when you look at the Titans, you said about the Rams game, I think that was really interesting, that it opened your eyes. And I kind of agree. Obviously, it was on Sunday Night Football. That defensive performance that they had, I think, is what opened my eyes and separated the Titans from the last couple of years to the team that we see today. Their pass rush has improved. Just the ability to get to the quarterback with the 4-man rush has improved immensely. Simmons has played amazing. Landry has had an amazing season. Dupree's been out. But that secondary, Kevin Byard's had maybe his best season ever. I look at this team with a pretty good balance, like you said, pretty good versatility to face whatever challenge comes their way. What do you think is their weakness? Like, what do you think is going to be their downfall if they lose in the playoffs?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that they're the best when they sort of dictate the game script and they play the way that they want them that they want to play.
Yeah,
And obviously,
I agree.
the top dogs like the Chiefs and the Bills, who play more so flashy football, they can't match that physicality. But I think if they do get ahead early, and the Titans are they have to go away from that hard ground game style, I think that's where they can run into a bit of trouble. I mentioned Ryan Tannehill. He's very good at what he's asked to do, but I think the moment you ask him to do just a little bit more, that's when they run into trouble. He's still, I think, very limited, not necessarily limited in terms of the throws that he can make, but he does have his flaws. This is a guy I've watched for a very long time. His pocket presence is maybe it's one of the worst in the NFL, I believe. But I think that's where the Titans can run into some issues. It's just that they're not built for shootouts. They're not going to win games 42-37. It's just not in their DNA. And it's depending on the week that you get. That's not necessarily what playoff football means. You don't have to outgun and outscore your opponent, but I think if they're asked to do that, I think that's where you can run into some issues.
And that's interesting to me because I think they're unique because I think they're capable of playing in shootouts, but it's like in a different type of way. Like, just for example, the Bills game that they played this season was a shootout.
Yeah.
But it was unconventional. Like, they were running the ball for like a 50-yard touchdown,
Exactly.
So they sort of can, but the game's got to be close. And that's where I see their weaknesses is offensively. I think you're right. Tannehill isn't necessarily the weakness, but I think it's the drop back pass game in general. I think as soon as that offensive line is having to go backwards instead of forwards, they give up a lot of sacks. They give up pressure. Tannehill isn't exactly the best in maneuvering the pocket, like you said, and extending plays that way and making those just in between tight coverage throws. And just as just concepts wise, just passing wise, they're much better from play action. Whenever they're in the shotgun 3rd and 10, it's pretty simple. It's going to go to AJ Brown. Like, that's basically what they're going to do. So the Titans, if they get behind 10 early in a game, it's going to be really tough because that's not how they want to play. On the flip side, defensively, and let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these points, defensively, I think their cornerbacks are the weakness. And that's why I look at it and I say they might have to play shootouts versus the Chiefs and the Bills because those teams got great quarterbacks, great receiving cores. And sure, their pass rush might give them an edge in certain matchups, but their corners at times, especially in the quick passing game, I feel like they don't really trust them a lot of the time. And they're having to kind of play softer coverages, which doesn't necessarily allow you to play that aggressive defensive style in certain situations. Like when you look at your Dolphins, they love to blitz. That's because they got great corners. With the Titans, that's not necessarily the case. Do you agree with me on either side, or do you disagree?
I think if there's definitely a spot on their defense to say that maybe they can be had here, it is the secondary. I mean, Kevin Byard is outstanding, but after that, there is a bit of a drop off. You look at who I think is their best corner, it's probably Christian Fulton. And that's a player I really like. I think he had a good season, but is he ready to be a lockdown corner who can say, hey, you got Tyreek Hill this week, it's a playoff game, you got to shut him down, or hey, you got Stephon Diggs, or even a team like the Bengals, you got to cover Jamar Chase, you got to cover T. Higgins. I don't know if he's quite at that level yet. I do think he has that potential. But yeah, I would say that's probably the weakness. Like, this is a pretty well-rounded roster. They don't have any areas where it's like, wow, that's an A+. It's a lot of B+, B down the entire roster, and I think in what they want to do, that works for them. But also, it can be their downfall in the sense that the one weak spot it's probably the secondary. And against the top, you mentioned those top dogs, how they like to play, it's not the best sort of weakness to have.
Lastly, when you look at the X factor for this team, if they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, this player, this position group, maybe a coach, what area of the football team do you see as this needs to take over, and that's why they're going to be champions?
Yeah, maybe this is a little bit off the board. We know the Titans. We know it's the Derrick Henry show, and then after, if teams want to key on him, they go to A.J. Brown. But I'm going to actually go defense side of the ball, and I'm going to say Jeffrey Simmons, because if you can wreak havoc in the opposing team's backfield, get to the quarterback, all that, it just makes it so much harder. You're going to get off the field quicker. You're going to get the ball back into Derrick Henry's hands, and he's sort of been their best player on the defensive side of the ball all season. I think he's had a phenomenal season. I'm going to say Jeffrey Simmons, and I think he needs to keep his strong play going in the playoffs in order to give the Titans a chance.
That's a good one. That is a really good one. I think their pass rush has to be key for them. I've said this a couple times, and some people have said, "Whoa, Mitch, you're crazy." I think AJ Brown is just as, if not more important than Derrick Henry. I really do. Because I think that threat over the top, if you don't have that, there is no threat you could just pack the box. Everybody's in the box stopping Derrick Henry. So I feel like that guy that on third down, like I said earlier, to throw him the ball against just one-on-one, you got to double that guy. He commands respect. He is a monster after the catch. That guy's ability to create plays everywhere on the field, I think, is the difference maker. And I think on top of Derrick Henry running the football, they need to have those big plays from A.J. Brown, or those moments in certain games where they're playing the Bills, they're playing the Chiefs, they're playing whoever, and they can just throw him the ball in a big spot and he's going to make a play. So, especially against those couple teams where maybe they don't have a number one shutdown corner. We saw him almost beat the Ravens by himself last year versus Marlon Humphrey. So I think that A.J. Brown is certainly an X factor for this team. But that is the Tennessee Titans, the number one seed. Let us know in the comments how you think they're going to do in the postseason. Let's move to the number 2 seed. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to spend more time on these top dogs because they're probably more likely to go deeper in the playoffs. With the Kansas City Chiefs, I've heard you on the podcast. Yeah. I know you're very high on the Kansas City Chiefs. I know you're not giving up hope on the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know if you've been listening to me all offseason. Bro, I've been saying the Kansas City Chiefs. I have this reputation of being a hater. I don't know. But I've kind of labeled them as overrated before the year. And I haven't seen enough quality victories from this football team that makes me suggest that this team is the same one that we've seen. I know they have the same logo. I know they have the same coach. I know they have the same quarterback. Tell me why I'm wrong, Thomas. Tell me why the Chiefs are back, why they're going to win this whole thing.
Yeah, Mitch, I've seen you on Twitter. I've hopped into a couple live streams. I've tuned into your power rankings. I had this one marked. I was excited to talk about it today because I do know your stance on them, and I know my stance on them. And I think, honestly, I don't blame you for your thinking. I honestly don't. And I think my stance has been being more of an optimist because rightfully so, I don't think they've had the same magic this year at all that we've seen in the past. So many of their victories have been unconvincing, but I also think that we hold them to a much higher standard than we do with other NFL teams. Just because Patrick Mahomes had this entrance to the NFL that made everyone think nothing is ever going to go wrong with this kid. He's going to win 8 Super Bowls in 8 years, and he's going to be the best because the way he started his career, he just made it look way too easy. And I think now that they've fallen down to earth a little bit and faced some struggles, and even in some of their wins, the teams that they've played have made it very, very tough on them. I think that that's almost going to help them go into the playoffs. And I always say that, the playoffs is all about peaking at the right time. And I still believe in my heart of hearts that when every team is at their best, I would take the Kansas City Chiefs just because I think Patrick Mahomes is that dynamic. I think they have so many weapons up front, and I think their offensive line, I think they got off to a shaky start, but I like the improvements that I saw over 18 weeks. So I really, I don't know, I have this belief in the Chiefs that maybe similar to the Bucs last year, they're just going to go on this upward trajectory and play their best football in January and February, and that they can be a real threat down the line here. I don't know, maybe it's a foolish belief, but I've just always had it with the Chiefs, no matter how bad they've looked at times early in the season.
It's totally fair to think that because when you watch them and just the team itself, obviously they've got a little bit of the mystique around them. They've got the vibes of being the top dog in the AFC for the last 2 years. And rightfully so, you are still believing that they can do it. And they've been a good team this year. Don't get me wrong. Like, the one thing you said, though, that I think I could say, well, they haven't really peaked at the right time. They lost to Cincinnati 2 weeks ago, and they almost lost to Drew Lock. So I'm saying, like, bro, hold up. I don't know if they're peaking at the right time. But then again, we look at the strengths of this football team, and we can just always hang our hat on Patrick Mahomes, especially in big games. I'll give him credit. The guy has been amazing for the most part in these big games. And whether win, lose, or draw, he has put his team in a position to win. And Travis Kelce is an absolute beast that he's every single week he commands attention, respect, double teams, can break a game open after the catch, great route runner, all that stuff. And then Tyreek Hill is the most unique weapon in football with his speed. And I think their greatest ability is it's 21-7. They're losing. They could go 8 plays and the game's tied. As quick strike ability to just the game is never over with them. What do you look at with this team? Is it that quick strike ability, or is it another area of this football team that you say that is a real strength for the Chiefs?
Yeah, it just comes down to Patrick Mahomes, and I think I don't know if he has not been the best quarterback in the NFL this year. That title goes to one of Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. But I just think when the chips are on the line, and like you said, they're down, and you cannot count this guy out. The year they won the Super Bowl, we saw exactly what he's capable of, and I think he's learned from those experiences. Like, you have to remember, this is still a young quarterback. I don't think he's reached his prime yet. He's still going to get better. So even at times this year when he's looked off target or maybe just sort of out of sorts or things weren't clicking on the offense, I've still always had this belief that he can get it done. And I think you said it perfectly. They're never, ever out of games. We just spent 20 minutes talking about the Tennessee Titans, how if they just go down 10-0 early in the game, we're going to push a panic button. But if the Chiefs are down 21-0 early, we've literally seen Mahomes do it, where they end up not just winning the game, but winning comfortably. So that's why I have a lot of confidence in Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And I just think he's such a dynamic player that it's just going to be tough to shut this guy down in the playoffs, especially when the Chiefs are at home. And if they beat the Steelers, they will be playing another home game. So,
yeah, I think on top of that, what makes them so special is the duo of Hill and Kelsey, because they're so uniquely crafted. They remind me a lot of Moss and Welker, where it's like that one big-time deep threat type of guy and then the one guy that moves the chains constantly. And that's what I see from both of them. And I feel like you've got to have such a unique defense. And I feel like defenses now have tried to craft themselves to stop the Chiefs. And that's why we've seen maybe a lesser Chiefs this year, is because now teams have been able to study the tape and craft a secondary or a defense that can slow them down. That team in particular more than any other. And I'm going to be intrigued to see how that comes in the playoffs, and if anybody is able to slow them down. Because I still look at them, with the Bucs losing some of their weaponry, I feel like they're the best offense probably still out there. And I think the X factor, like you said earlier, is probably the offensive line, because it's improved a ton, and it's maybe given them an avenue to run the football a bit more, which could be crucial in some of these cold weather games. What do you look at on their team that might be the difference between winning the Super Bowl, losing the Super Bowl, or losing too early in these playoffs?
Well, you can obviously point towards their defense, who sort of had this rejuvenation around the midway point in the season.
Yeah,
They started
they're
off
weird.
the season just on a terrible, terrible stretch, and then they went on a bit of a run where they weren't ever allowing more than 20 points a game. So it's a bit of two-face and which defense is going to show up in the playoffs, and I really hope that the right one does. They've had a lot of emerging young players. Nick Bolton at linebacker, a couple of their corners, Rashad Fenton, Travarius Ward, L'Jarius Sneed. Like, these are all pretty solid NFL players, and I think that they could play a big role. But one thing I want to mention, and I think they should maybe put a little bit more emphasis on, you talked about how the offensive line could potentially open up avenues to run the football. 2 seasons ago, the season opener, when the Kansas City Chiefs played the Houston Texans, it was Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's first ever NFL game. The way that they used him in that game and how successful he was, I sort of had this feeling like, man, this guy can be a star in the league, and it just sort of never has happened. I know he's a bit banged up. I'm not sure what his status is going into the Pittsburgh game, but based on the initial diagnosis, it sounded like he could return at some point in the playoffs. So I would love to see him get involved, because I think he has some untapped potential that they sort of haven't really worked into their offensive game plan.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think when you combine him behind that offensive line. He's not a superstar or game breaker or anything like that, but what I like about him, I loved him coming out of the draft because of his receiving skills, but also his quickness and his balance. He's not a breakaway runner, but he's a guy that he sees a lane and he can make a guy miss in the hole and can get a couple extra yards, that sort of thing. And I feel like why they got this offensive line and this powerful offensive line is when teams go light, right? They've got all these DBs on the field. Now they can run the ball from the shotgun down your throat for 6 yards a carry. And I think they haven't used that enough, in my opinion. Just like the ability to possess the ball to keep their defense, which is probably their weakness, off the field. And let's just play with Mahomes with the ball the whole game. Let's try not. Maybe that's Mahomes' fault. Like maybe he's too like trying to look for the big play all the time, which has definitely been something that's hurt him. But they could just go out there for 8-minute drives for the 49ers and just keep their defense. And now their defense, which has been risky. It's a very aggressive defense. They love to blitz. They love to play man coverage. When that's clicking, it's phenomenal. When it doesn't work, they're giving up huge play after huge play after huge play like we saw in the Bengals game. So I feel like to maximize their team, they should maybe play into that a little bit more, possess the ball a little bit more. Maybe it means Mahomes doesn't throw the ball as much, but maybe it means the best way to win, especially this year, and especially maybe versus some teams like Cincinnati and Buffalo potentially, who can match you on the scoreboard. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, you alluded to it earlier, that quick strike sort of football that is one of their strengths when they're down in games could potentially contribute to their downfall in games where they're sort of going back and forth with teams. Because like you said, I don't know if deflating is the right word, but when your defense gives up a score and then your offense goes out there and they score so fast that you're right back on the field in 5 minutes and you don't have that chance to catch your breath, especially in like a cold weather type facility. It could be Kansas City, even Tennessee, if they end up going there. But I think that is something that it's almost like they should take a couple pieces from what the Titans do, but just do it in their own way and with much better players and a star quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. So I think that's something they should almost calm it down on, potentially get the run game going, because you have this offensive line. Why not use it to your strengths?
Yeah, I think that is, if I were to point to like the weakness of them or anything, I feel like when teams beat them, it's not necessarily because they beat Mahomes or like shut down the offense. It's more so they possess the ball. And they limit the possessions, and they condense the game, and they make it so that that defense for the Chiefs is on the field for most of the game. And that is where I look at this defense and I say they're a good defense when they're set up in these situations where Spagnuolo can get out his crazy nickel packages and just send people from the left, the right, the middle, and like they're playing man coverage and stuff. But then there's times where when a team's more kind of patient and they can slowly attack you through the run and the pass, that is where they struggle, in my opinion. So I feel like Kansas City is one that I wouldn't rule out going to the Super Bowl. But there's also these games this year where I just feel like they're not quite the same as years past.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a fair take. And we'll see. I've almost felt all year like I have this sort of delusional sense of optimism with the Chiefs, but maybe that will end up paying off for me in the end.
Potentially one of the teams that could take it to the Chiefs in the playoffs is the number 3 seed, the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are in many ways very much like the Kansas City Chiefs, and I feel like they've maybe tried to craft their team sort of like the Kansas City Chiefs from the top with the dynamic quarterback Josh Allen, and Thomas can maybe reply to me on this, but I feel he is the best quarterback in the AFC this year, and I think that he could be the guy that the one-man show puts the team on his back and takes this team to the Super Bowl. It could very well happen, but they could also lose in the first round because my Patriots play them, of course, so I've got to back them. But we look at this Bills team, and they are so strange because their record is nowhere close to their statistics. Statistically, they are phenomenal. I'm talking like really, really, really good. Like Super Bowl favorite. They have the best defense. They have a top 10 offense, obviously. They have the best point differential. They demolish teams. And in every area across the board, pass offense, pass defense, run defense, even if it doesn't appear in certain games, like especially the run defense, like it's all that good, it's one of the best in the league, according to whatever you look at. So they're a team where I feel like a lot of the analytical folk will say this is the team that you should back in the AFC. But there's also the games where they don't play well and they play down to competition. They lost the Jaguars, which I guess is not as bad because the Colts lost to them as well. But that's just
and the Dolphins.
And the Dolphins' fault. Yeah, the Dolphins are the Dolphins. I don't know. How do you feel about this team? Are you somebody that looks at the positive with the Bills, or are you somebody that maybe says, I'm not a huge fan?
I've been one of the biggest critics on the Bills all year long, and maybe because I hold them to a higher standard. I do think at their best, like this is a Super Bowl caliber team. I think if you look at their roster, top to bottom, I mentioned that I don't think the Titans have many holes. The Bills, literally, I don't think that they have many holes at all on their roster, except for one thing, and this is why I've just been, in some weeks, just ripping them. I think they are way too dependent on who you call the best quarterback in the AFC. I think it's far too much the Josh Allen show there. They have a non-existent running game. And
from
honestly,
the running backs.
Oh, yeah, Josh Allen.
Yeah, because literally Josh Allen is their whole offense.
He's their whole entire offense. And
yeah,
he is a phenomenal player. But I think when you get to the best teams, you face some really good head coaches who can cook up some really good schemes to make it very, very difficult for your star quarterback, especially a guy who, I know he's still young, but he doesn't have this big playoff resume. What does he have? One playoff win in his career. Or two. He won 2 playoff games last year.
2.
Regardless, I just think that the Bills, their biggest strength is Josh Allen, but at times he can be their biggest downfall because they just put the ball in his hands and ask him to do far too much. And until I can see a solid run game from their running backs, Zach Moss, who has just been this healthy inactive for much of the season, and Devin Singletary, who just has never really taken that next step that a lot of people pegged him to take. So they're an interesting team. You're right. When they win big and they dominate opponents and they make their opponents look like, high school teams. But other weeks they're very frustrating and they just seem like they lack this consistency. I don't know if it's a lack of focus or what, but I've flip-flopped on this team. I've criticized this team, and the way that their season has gone, I don't know if I'm all that confident to say that I can see a Lombardi trophy in Josh Allen's hand this year.
Okay. That's fair. I think I look at them and I'll be a little bit more of the optimist here. And I will say, in such a flawed AFC and NFL this year, I think what you can say about them is they have Josh Allen. They've got an offense that is really good, even if they don't run the ball. And they've got a defense that is one of the better ones in football. So when you combine that, even though they're not balanced, right? And even though they lack, I feel, and this is where I've been very critical of them, they are not physical. They can be beat up on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And there are games they've lost this year to Tennessee, to Indianapolis, to New England, where they were just beat down physically. And they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't stop the run. But they're coaching on both sides. I think they've got great coordinators. I think they've got a great head coach. And they're more confident. I'm more confident in their ability to play good offense and good defense than any team in this conference, because I don't think the Chiefs defense is on their level of that defense. I don't think the Bengals, I don't think the Titans, I don't think the Patriots have the offense to match them. I don't think any of these teams have both of the offense and the defense that you could possibly put in the top 5 in the AFC, which I think is where you could maybe say, maybe you've got something with Buffalo, but then you come back to, well, they're predictable, right? They're predictable. You know, offensively, you should smash them right in their face and then make them defend the run and then try to pass when they pack the box up. And then when they're on offense, go light, force them to run the ball. So, Thomas, what do you think of that rebuttal, and what do you think of potentially the physicality element that could be their downfall?
I'm not going to debate at all. I do think that what you said is absolutely correct, where they have the most balanced roster in the AFC by far, because like their defense, I think, might even be better than how good their offense is. Like I have a lot of belief in this Bills defense. I think they have a lot of star players or players who are budding stars. I just can't see past the not that they're so predictable on offense, which I mean I kind of feel that they are, but it's just, to me, it's too much of a one man show, and
Yep.
maybe I'm contradicting myself by having so much belief in the Chiefs but not believing in the Bills. But I just think the Chiefs can do a little bit more in different ways than the Bills. Just simply, okay, Josh Allen, Josh Allen, Josh Allen. And I don't know if that's going to work when the going gets tough in the playoffs.
I think you're right in terms of, like, it makes them very unpredictable from week to week, which has probably been their downfall this year. Because, like, when you're relying so heavily on one player, he could play bad in one game and you'll lose.
Yeah.
But then again, he could play amazing on a playoff run where he's the best player, and then they win the Super Bowl. So, like, they are a completely unpredictable team because they are so reliant on that player. And I agree with you. They are very reliant on Josh Allen. And that is why I think he's the best quarterback, because he's probably the most valuable in this conference to me at this moment. Not saying Mahomes hasn't been better in the past or whatever. But I think the wrinkle to that could be potentially what they do with him as a runner, and to set themselves up. And that might he might have a lot of abuse. Maybe they win the first game like that, but maybe the second game becomes it's just too much, or the third game, maybe having to ask him to carry the ball 12 times is going to be difficult for him. But maybe he's going to have to do that for this team to have its most success and remain some sort of balance, because I don't know if they have enough in terms of just their running game from a running back perspective. They're just not successful enough doing it. Not saying they don't have the creativity to do it. I just don't know if they can do it. And maybe that's where the offensive line comes in. And then you're having to protect him for 40 times a game versus good pass rushers. So, yeah, they're a difficult team. I think that's why it makes it so hard to predict them, and why I've said numerous times I could see them going to the Super Bowl. I could see them losing in the first game.
Yeah, especially the matchup against New England. I know that they sort of had their way with them the last time they met, but I think if you get into that, physical sort of showdown that you spoke about earlier, I think that's where, not necessarily saying that they're going to lose, but it could be a very, very close game.
In terms of the X factor point for them, what do you think, if they do go to win the Super Bowl, what do you think is like the area of the team that you need to see rise to the occasion?
I think I'm a little interested in their secondary, just because they lost Tre'Davious White for the season. I know they have I mean, safety wise, they're A plus with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, but at the corner spot, who is going to step up and fill the shoes of someone that is, dare I say, a near irreplaceable player in Tre'Davious White, who I think is a top 5 cornerback in the NFL, especially when, like we said before, we talked about the Titans, when you go up against these every single team in the AFC that's alive right now has a strong receiver that the Bills could potentially play. So I think that's going to be something that I'm really intrigued to see. And if the Bills want to find success, they're going to need someone to step up and answer the call.
That's a very good one. I've been impressed with their ability to replace him, or at least do well defensively in coverage without him, but they haven't necessarily faced a ton of great passing attacks through that stretch. So not having that number one corner versus Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, definitely going to be tough. I think overall, we've kind of brought up most aspects to them. I feel like the X factor is their ability to manage weather. I know that is really weird, but
No, when you play in Buffalo, it's warranted.
They're a dome team.
Factor.
They're a dome team,
Yeah.
Thomas. They're a dome team, and they play in Buffalo. So I just look at them and I say they're a speed team. You know, if this game in New England or versus New England is snowing, that's going to be a lot more difficult than if it was sunny. If they go to Kansas City and it is cold and it is windy, well, I think Kansas City might be a little bit more of a live, probably favorite, but like team to go move on. And then in Tennessee, we know how that might go if it's not exactly good weather. So in a conference with a lot of teams in the cold weather environment being the better teams, even Cincinnati, so it is so weird that Buffalo has set themselves up as this team that is so finesse.
Yeah, definitely a good point. Like, we saw the Patriots go into Buffalo in one of the craziest weather games in recent memory, and they sort of showed them who's boss there just by, like you said, punching them right in the face and running it right down the middle.
The number 4 seed is the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm really intrigued to see your perspective and talk about this team because I think they're fascinating. I think they're very entertaining. I think they're electric. I think they're exciting. I don't know how good they are. I don't know how good they are. I love Joe Burrow. I think he's phenomenal. You know, he's been one of the top graded quarterbacks in football, according to PFF. And I think he's been one of the MVPs of football this year. And they have such a dynamic where they are so quick strike and they are so big play explosive with the receivers and Joe Burrow that they could go on a little bit of a run. But I just don't know if they have enough on top of that elsewhere to be this team that can make a run. How do you feel about the Cincinnati Bengals, Thomas?
I can definitely see them going on a run, but this morning I actually recorded a podcast previewing Wild Card Weekend, and I picked the Raiders to upset them.
I'm gonna say this. I like that pick. I'm saying the more I dive into this game, it is a tough matchup for the Bengals. It is.
Yeah, like I watched the Bengals beat the Raiders pretty handily earlier in the season. That's when the Raiders were sort of on their downfall. I've been a Raiders hater the entire season, and even when they were 3-0,
How? We're gonna get to the Raiders
when they win. No, because for the past couple years, I watched the Raiders start off well and completely unravel down the stretch, and I said I won't get on there. I won't, root for them or give them any sort of confidence until I see them not do that.
Okay.
And they started doing that when they went to 6-7, but winning 4 games down the stretch and how they won them showed a lot of character, especially what they battled through this year, and it really impressed me. And I really like Derek Carr. I think he can go toe-to-toe with a lot of the top players in the AFC, a lot of the top quarterbacks in the AFC. The reason why I picked the Raiders was more so like the Bengals are a really young team, and they sort of remind me of the Rams about 4 or 5 years back when Jared Goff and Todd Gurley got to the playoffs for the first time.
Okay.
They were this hot team, dominated headlines throughout the season, and they went one and done against a veteran Falcons team in the first round of the playoffs simply just because they weren't ready. They weren't ready for the playoffs are almost a different league than the regular season, and I think that's why I'm approaching the Bengals with a little bit of caution. But with the talent that they have, especially on the offensive side of the ball, I can see the run happening.
Okay, to counter that point with the Rams, I think a lot of that has to do with the quarterback position. I don't think Jared Goff is Joe Burrow. I don't think Joe
No,
Burrow is
definitely
Jared
not.
Goff. I think Joe Burrow, and this is why I look at them maybe a tad different from an experience standpoint. He is so swaggy. I mean, the guy is ridiculous with this confidence level of just being a winner. And I think they're almost like a team that is young. They don't know what they don't know. They're just going to play. And whatever happens, happens. And I definitely agree with you with the Raiders. We'll get to them in a second here. But the Cincinnati Bengals are a team that, led by Joe Burrow, I don't count them out in any game. I could see them falling behind and coming back. I could see them, in a lead. I feel like Joe Burrow just gives this team that X factor. Maybe he is their X factor. I'm really just questioning the rest of the team from a talent perspective. I just don't know how good the offensive line is. I don't know if they can hold up versus good pass rushes. I don't know if they have a run game anymore. They have not been able to run the ball for weeks, and they've been so reliant on Joe Burrow to do it. And I love Joe Mixon, but I think it's more so like opening up holes for him to do things. And then from a defensive perspective, they were okay, but they faced a very weak schedule of opposing offenses, and they haven't looked great lately versus a lot of offenses. So I feel like a lot it's on Trey Hendrickson to get the quarterback. You miss Wilson at linebacker. The corners are average, Do you think this team has the supporting cast around Joe Burrow to maybe pick him up if he's not playing amazing?
No, I like this team lives and dies with how far Joe Burrow takes them, and I think the expectation that might be placed on Joe Burrow because of how he ended that season is almost a little bit unfair for a young quarterback. Like,
Yeah.
you can't expect him to throw 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no turnovers every game to win. And I think that's where they might fall victim here, because if you look at their defense after Trey Hendrickson, like, where's the help? Yeah, there's a couple players here and there that I do like. You mentioned the secondary; it's a little weak, but yeah, Mike Hilton's a pretty
Mike
good
Hilton
player, and Von
just
Bell had a
played.
decent season. But
Yeah.
by no means are they a top defense. By no means do they have a top O line. So it's just like, yeah, Joe Burrow. He's fun. He can make plays on his own. One I was reading on Twitter earlier today, essentially his last 6 big-time games, dating back to college in terms of bowl games, national championships, and then the last 2 games of this NFL season where the Bengals essentially needed to win in order to grab the division. He has been out of this world. He's so clutch. He's a big-time performer, and I think he's going to do very, very well in the NFL. I just don't think the team is ready for him to win in the playoffs just yet.
Yeah, he's going to have to negate really an offensive line that is not going to put him in advantageous positions, which he's been able to do the last couple of weeks and escape pressure and make plays. I feel a big side of that downside is they're so explosive that they don't have. I think the Chiefs have done a good job of kind of going back and creating some offense that is a little bit easier for them. And I don't think the Bengals necessarily have that like dink and dunk ability that the Chiefs have now figured out. They are so much Jamar Chase down the field that when you lock that down, it becomes hard for them in a lot of matchups I've seen this year. And yeah, I mean, defensively, they definitely have good players around, and especially, nickel corner safeties and Trey Hendrickson. But I also say, like, the coaching, I think it's more so the coaching than anything else. I just don't know if I believe in Zach Taylor. If they had an experienced coach who I really believed in with Joe Burrow, I might be like, yeah, they're good for a win and maybe two. But that even makes me question the first round of, like, is Zach Taylor ready? Is the whole coordinators and this staff ready?
I've never really been a huge Zach Taylor guy as well, but he has impressed me, at least this season. I mean, going from last in a tough division to winning it the next year, he has to get a little bit of credit for that, even though I think a lot of it is that Burrow and Chase connection that has pretty much transformed that organization. But yeah, it's going to be a tough I think a lot of people are overlooking the Raiders, and I mean, I picked them to win. I feel a little bit like risky with that. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think I think the Bengals. It's by no means an easy win here.
To end positive with the Bengals, I will say, if they can continue this pace with the offense and the quick strike and the ability to create these big plays, I actually think if they end up going to Tennessee, I think they match up fairly well with the Titans because of what we brought up with Tennessee. And I think Joe Burrow could have a lot of success versus their defense. I think there's a possibility there where they could get ahead and they could let Trey Hendrickson and company get to the quarterback. I definitely think that's interesting with Cincinnati, but you got to get past the Raiders, who are next up, who are the greatness of the Raiders. And I love the Raiders, bro. I love this football team. They are so just incredible in terms of their story. I can't believe what they've been able to overcome with the coach and Henry Ruggs. It's just like Derek Carr, man. I love this guy. I just love this team this year. They're so exciting. They put on the best games every week almost. Feels like from top to bottom. The Baltimore game to open the year, the Charger game to end the year. I mean, it's just amazing. The Raiders are a story, but are they a good football team, Thomas?
I feel like everyone's going to call me just a flip-flopper in the
Oh,
comments.
no.
I am going
Don't
back
do
and
it.
forth on both sides. Like I said, I picked them to win, and I do think they do a lot of things very well, and they are exciting. And I think Darren Waller, we have not seen the best of him this year. He's battled injuries, but when he's healthy, he is a guy that I don't think anybody can shut down. And Hunter Renfrow deserves a lot of credit, and I like the job Rich Bisaccia has done since he took over. The one thing I'll say to sort of go back against my point that I think that I picked them to win this week, to approach with caution, they've won 6 games this year. I believe they won 10 in the season. So 6 of those 10 wins have been won on the final play of the game.
4 in overtime.
How sustainable is that?
4 in overtime.
Yeah. Like, you got to think in a parallel universe, they could easily be a 6-win team just by how close they've cut it in so many games. And a lot of the times, I hate to say it, but I've noticed a little trend, and I feel like they may have found a bit of a loophole in the NFL. Their favorite play is, let's throw it deep in the end zone and see if the refs are going to toss a flag.
Joe Flacco.
Yeah, that's something that I've seen a lot, and it's often with the black and silver of the Raiders on my screen. Like I said, I like them. I think they're a great story this year. I don't think that they have any Super Bowl. There's no Super Bowl in their future. Maybe those words can come back to bite me, like many of my words against the Raiders have this season. But I don't know. I think it would be great if they upset the Bengals, and I give them a shot to do that. But like I said, they're in tight games, and they make it look very, very difficult to win often.
I think their absolute ceiling, and I think this is farther than anyone thinks they could go, is the AFC Championship. I think they could win 2 playoff games. I do. I think there's a world where that could happen. I think they could lose the first game, no doubt. They're the underdog. I think it's a 5.5 point spread right now, maybe 6. So the Raiders, they're going to have to overcome. But they're a football team when you look at their strengths, their weaknesses. Defensively, they have improved immensely. This is where I slept on this team in the offseason. I did not see this pass rush. I did not see Max Crosby leading the NFL in pressures as CTB puts up there every single week. I did not see Yannick Ngakoue. I did not see Quinton Jefferson. I did not see all these guys getting to the quarterback. And Crosby is insane. The guy is he's his motor. I know that's like a buzzword. He's at the quarterback every play. It's like, what? Like, can this guy relax for a second here? And then they're tough. They're physical. I think they've improved a lot versus the run. Especially when you look at the Colts game, what they were able to do to shut down Jonathan Taylor. I think Casey Hayward has had a resurgence in the secondary, but there are certainly weaknesses there as well in the defense. Safety position is a downright disaster, I think. And then their other perimeter corner spot, I think they're actually solid at nickel, but and the scheme with Gus Bradley, like you see them play the Chiefs and then they just don't adjust and they get shredded. But versus most other teams, they've been fairly solid. And I think that pass rush could be the X factor for them in a game versus the Bengals. In a game maybe versus the Titans if they advance. How do you feel about the Raiders as that defensively as a team that maybe is being slept on? Or do you think I'm wrong?
Word. I feel like definitely their front four deserves some more credit, especially someone like Max Crosby. I think oftentimes people just look at one metric, and that's sacks, but that doesn't tell the level of success that a pass rusher always has. You mentioned pressures. I think he didn't just lead the league in pressures. He led by, I think, more than 15, which is just crazy. He had over 100 pressures this season. He pretty much lives in the backfield. And I like what you said, that presents a nice matchup against a team like the Bengals that doesn't have a lot of success in pass protection. Joe Burrow is one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL this year. So I don't know if the Raiders' defense is necessarily slept on. I would maybe put them around a bit of an average unit. They definitely have big holes. I think we started with the 1 seed. Now we're talking about the 5 seed in the AFC. Now is where you get to the squads that have clear holes on their roster.
Yeah.
Like you said, secondary, I don't have confidence in it. The linebacker core doesn't really have that stud. I mean, Denzel Perryman had a pretty good season this year. I know he's battled injuries later on.
They've got a lot of, like, average linebackers. They've got, like, 4 of them.
So, I don't know. They're not a defense that makes, like you said AFC Championship. I have a hard time believing
it's the ceiling. It's the ceiling. Come on, cut me a break here.
So, yeah.
I'm being optimistic here. I think if their ability to just what I've seen over the last stretch. I mean, they've beaten essentially teams we thought we would be in the playoffs, right? That's what I really like about them too. They beat the Chargers. They beat the Colts 2 games like in a row, and now they're gonna be ready for the Bengals for that next step. And I think that is something to not discount. Offensively, Hunter Renfrow, this guy is a machine. He is so good. I mean, nobody talks about him, but he's such a crafty route runner and moves the chains every third down, a red zone. He's a challenge. And Darren Waller, if he can get back to Darren Waller-ness, he can be an X factor for them too. And we spoke about Derek Carr, who's just a pure gamer. And I think the spirit and the heart of this football team. But I think it all comes down to they are a team that is running off heart. They are the underdog, and we'll see how far they can go. Any final words on the Raiders?
They've proven me wrong all year, and if they keep doing it, good for them. It's like I said all along, it's a good story, and Derek Carr is someone who has not gotten the credit he's deserved throughout his career, so I'm sort of rooting for him in his first playoff start, and I hope things go well for him and the team.
Final point I forgot to talk about with them, Josh Jacobs has been really good the last couple of weeks, and if they can keep running the ball, I think that will help them as well. Moving to my New England Patriots, Thomas, a team that the Dolphins own, but luckily for the Patriots, they don't have to play the Miami Dolphins, but they do have to play the Buffalo Bills in the first round. Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. The New England Patriots, before the year, if you would have told me Mac Jones, quarterback of this team, goes to the playoffs, I'd be happy. But the way the season went, you start 2-4. You are underwhelming because I see you. I make a video called Bill Belichick Broke Me. He broke me because he was letting the team down. They weren't playing their best football. And then they go on this run. They look like the best team in the conference. And then all of a sudden they end the year and they're playing sloppy football, penalties, turnovers, just getting in their own way. And every game they have like this comeback, but then they just fall short. They are a very frustrating team to watch right now, the New England Patriots, because I think they're better than they've finished this season. Maybe they're not as good as they were during that run, but I think the expectation before the year is hard to hold on to when you saw them play at such a level and saw the rest of the conference be very beatable. Where do you stand on the Patriots, Thomas?
I think they're an interesting team. I'd almost compare them to the team we spoke about earlier, the Tennessee Titans. I still have my questions. I mean, Mac Jones is a rookie. I thought he had a very good rookie
He
season,
did.
but he's not Justin Herbert. He's not Joe Burrow. Yes, he's still going to get much better throughout his career, and he's going to learn. I could see him being a very, very productive player in this game. Is he the guy to go in and outgun Josh Allen this week? No, he's not. That's not how they're going to win this game. They're going to win by using their two-headed monster, and yes, I'll call this a two-headed monster, of Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. I love what they have up front on the offensive line. Defensively, the last couple of weeks, it has not looked outstanding, but they have very, very strong players throughout that roster. So they're a very interesting team. Of course, you know them better than I do. I can't really wrap my head around their inconsistencies, but at the same time, the teams that they play that they are, who I believe, better than, they beat. And if you look
Yep.
at their losses, like you said, they started 2-4. They lost to the Buccaneers, the Cowboys, the New Orleans Saints, who have a very good defense. Week 1, they lost to Miami in what I think was a little bit unlucky with a Damian
Yeah,
Harris fumble late in the game. Like, that game could have easily gone the other way. So maybe it's just they are what they are, and against
maybe.
teams that maybe they're just not ready to beat yet because they have a rookie quarterback. That's when they struggle. Um, but they've definitely been a little bit inconsistent throughout the year. But I think at their best, they can play with the top teams in the AFC.
Yeah, I think you're right in a way. I think the more the frustration from a fan perspective, from my perspective, is like a lot of the time when they lose these games, it's not because they're being out talented. It's because they're making mistakes that I don't see Patriot teams make. Like I don't see these penalties where they go off sides on a kick on a field goal or like last week where the guy's over the center on a punt return.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen for Bill Belichick teams. They don't fumble or throw pick sixes, and maybe that's the rookie quarterback. Like I just feel like this team in terms of their details has been off in recent weeks. And that's why I look at them as a dark horse, because I feel like if they can piece together again and get back to mistake-free football, they do have the ability to play with everybody because of their roster versatility. Because I feel like all around, like the Titans, they're built of a crafty kind of be this team one week, be that team the other week. They have that physicality element in the playoffs that is definitely key. And like you've said, the Dolphins, they're obviously not been a great matchup. They've lost to some good teams. They've proven they can play with everybody. But do they have the ability, the playmakers, the over-the-top nature of this team and to just beat these top dogs? And I think Mac might not be there yet to be like one of the top 10 guys to be able to win these duels or offensively, they don't have that go-to receiver. They don't have the Julian Edelman. So I think that might be more so than Mac Jones. They might not have the number one receiver to be able to rely on in some of these situations. But if the defense plays really well, like it has during the year, I've said that during the year at times they've been the best defense in the league. I think that they have the capacity, but it comes down to those details. It comes down to playing Patriot football. Special teams has been severely disappointing this year for this team that always has a top 3 special teams. So I think a lot of what they're doing wrong has to be fixed, and I just don't have much faith that they're going to be able to do that and turn it around right away. There's clear deficiencies, though, Thomas. I think I know what they are, and I think you know what they are. I think that's the vertical passing game. I don't think anybody's scared of their ability to take the top off of the defense.
Yeah, they don't have that guy that I think can really stretch the field. I mean, if you look at their best options in the passing game, it doesn't really shake any of these teams or scare them. It's nothing to really worry about or over scheme for. I think their double tight end signing of Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry I think it could have worked out a little bit better than it has. I think Hunter Henry's been good in the red
Yeah.
zone. Jonnu Smith, I've been disappointed in.
On those tight ends, I think Hunter Henry has been what they expected him to be. I think, like you said, the red zone option, third down, he moves the chains, and he's created a couple big plays here and there. But like you said, Jonnu Smith, I don't know what it is. The involvement hasn't been there, and that's been more so than anything. Maybe they're going to unveil him in the playoffs. I really hope so, because especially in these weather games where maybe Mac Jones is a rookie, you're not counting on him to throw the ball vertically in Buffalo in the cold 0-degree weather, that you're going to have maybe Jonnu Smith get some screens or some reverses. That's where he's at his best. But yeah, like Nelson Aguilar maybe hasn't been the deep threat he was with the Raiders. Maybe that's partly Mac Jones or partly their restraint on Mac Jones offensively to not have him throw the ball down the field because they understand they're a defense-first team. And that's what it really comes down to for me, Thomas, to be quite honest with you with this football team is the defense has got to perform. They've got to be the best defense in this playoffs if they hope to make a run, because if they're not, Bill plays these games through the defense. Whether you like it or not as a fan, sometimes they're going to punt on 4th and 2 at the 45-yard line because they think they're going to win the field position and they're going to get the ball back. Or they're going to count on their defense with 3 timeouts to make that stop, even versus Jonathan Taylor. And whether that's, I just feel like they always count on the defense. When the chips are down, it's the defense that needs to rise to the occasion. And overall, I just don't know with the losses that they did have in the secondary, like if this team kept Gilmore and still had Jonathan Jones, maybe we're talking about this defense being like really, really phenomenal, but they just, when those chips have been on the line and they have to get that stop. We saw the last week of the season versus the Dolphins. They could have made a comeback to a scramble for a first down. I don't know if they've been able to do that. So if they can play from out in front and play their brand of football, they're a great team. But otherwise, I think they're too rigid to be able to win this year or have a sustained playoff run.
Yeah, I'll say this, and it's not often I say good things about the Patriots, but it is. You're having me here today, so I feel like I sort of have to. I talked about the Chiefs earlier, and I said there's no quarterback I'd rather have in the AFC than Patrick Mahomes. There's no coach I'd rather have in a playoff game than Bill Belichick. And their matchup this week is the team that I've criticized for being way too dependent on one player. And who's the greatest coach in NFL of scheming to just shut down the opposing team's star player? That's Bill Belichick. And if the Patriots march into Buffalo this week, make life very difficult for Josh Allen, I honestly won't bat an eye. I think they have a chance against the Bills. I think it's probably the team that you could have asked for over anyone. I'm not sure how you feel on who you're playing, but honestly, I don't know. A divisional matchup, I like the underdog in the playoff games, and I think it's going to be a real tight battle.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tight. I think either way it's going to be tight. I think I would have probably rather played the Bengals because it would have been Bill Belichick versus Zach Taylor, and I think that would have been a big advantage for the Patriots. On top of, I think there's more deficiencies on the roster of the Bengals that the Patriots could take advantage of. But the Bills are a team that I look at third time playing them as something with Bill Belichick. You've got game plans. And I felt like for a positive spin here going into the first matchup versus Buffalo, the Bills kind of unveiled like all of the goods. Like they were like, we're going to do this crazy trick play here, this run here, this quarterback run here, like this defensive blitz. Like they kind of went all in to beat the Patriots in Gillette Stadium, and they did, and they handily beat them. But if you're looking at a guy that could maybe look at that and say, okay, that's what they did here. That's what they like on 3rd and 7. Okay, like this is what we're going to do to counter that. Now the Patriots get their counter punch because the first game was kind of just like, we're going to run the ball. Like there was no game plan. It was just like run the ball straight. So it didn't even really count. So now the Patriots get the counter punch. And if you're a Patriots fan, I think that is something to look at. But we'll see how it goes for New England. I think they're sort of that dark horse team that a lot of these AFC teams, because of Belichick and potentially the defense getting hot and potentially the running game, that a lot of teams don't necessarily want to play. Like if you're the Titans, who they beat. New England beat them pretty easily. I know that wasn't Derrick Henry, but they beat them pretty easily earlier. Or if you're the Chiefs, you've struggled versus Belichick in the past. You probably don't want to play him. So I think that the Patriots are sort of that dark horse scary type of team, but I just don't know if they've had enough consistency this year. The 7 seed is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I think they are a happy team to be here. I think they're very happy to be in the playoffs because now it means one more game for Ben Roethlisberger. Thomas, I'm going to be blunt. Is there absolutely any chance that the Pittsburgh Steelers have of even getting out of the first round?
Be honest with me here, Mitch. If you were to rank the teams in the AFC, just completely ignore the playoff seedings.
Yeah.
Would the Steelers even be in your top 10?
Ooh. I think I'd have the
personally,
Colts and the Chargers above them.
I would put, and of course this is my bias, I would put my Dolphins above the Steelers. I think I would.
That one's close. I think the Dolphins.
It's very close.
They're very similar, sort of, in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I think the quarterback and the offensive line on both teams are the weaknesses of both teams, to be honest with you. But I feel like, the Steelers maybe because of their Mike Tomlin, Big Ben edge. I don't know, but their offense has been so bad. I don't want to be all negative about the Steelers here, and we're going to give maybe a spin on how they could pull off the miracle. They're like 13-point underdogs or something like that versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But it's a good story with Ben. I thought that they were done after that game on Monday night where they were just so emotional. Ben was crying. Yeah. Like, I thought they were just going to pack it in and they were going to be done for the season and even lose to the Ravens. But this team has a resiliency. And Mike Tomlin, great job to get this team into the playoffs because their offense has been putrid. Their play calling has been disgusting. It's the worst in the playoffs. It's one of the worst in the league offensively. They've got playmakers, though, on both sides. They've got Deontay Johnson, who's a super underrated receiver. Chase Claypool, who's a dummy, but a good receiver. Najee Harris, who's pretty good. And even Pat Fairmuth, the tight end. And, they've got guys on offense. TJ Watt, the sack master. Cam Hayward, who's a monster. Minka Fitzpatrick. They've got guys everywhere on every level of playmakers, but I just don't know if Ben is up to it. I don't know if they can protect Ben when the chips are down. I don't know about the offensive coaching. Thomas, bro, I don't know. The Steelers, come on. There's got to be something with the Steelers. They're like an iconic franchise. Something.
Yeah, and I'll give you a positive. I don't think that there's a duo on the defensive line that's better than TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward. And I think if people go back and watch that game on Monday Night Football against the Cleveland Browns, where I think they had 8 sacks on Baker Mayfield, and it wasn't just the sacks. It was every single time Baker dropped back, TJ Watt was in his hair. And every time he tried to throw the ball, Cameron Hayward was batting the pass down, or TJ Watt was batting the pass down. And I think, obviously, Patrick Mahomes is not Baker Mayfield, and he's much more mobile, and the offensive line that the Chiefs are going to be fielding is a lot better than that injury-riddled offensive line that the Browns fielded a couple weeks ago. So it's a much harder matchup, but I think if they are going to have any chance in this one, it's going to be the fact that TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward not just make Mahomes' life a living hell on Sunday, but they force turnovers, whether it's strip sacks or sometimes Mahomes, to his discredit, when he gets flustered, he tries to make a play and tries a little bit too hard. And that's when he throws the ball, across the field, cross-body. So maybe they can grab an interception.
Yeah.
Minka Fitzpatrick at safety has a knack for forcing turnovers as well. Didn't have the best season this year, but he has that potential. So it's going to be one on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not going to sit here and tell you with a straight face that they're going to win the game because Ben Roethlisberger is going to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, because if that happens, it would be the shock of the century. But like I said, it's a long shot, but they have the players up front. They have the star power to make it uneasy for the Chiefs.
They have that Tampa Bay formula a little
Exactly.
bit.
Just without Tom Brady, which is a pretty big
Which
ingredient.
he's pretty good, I've heard.
Yeah.
But the defensive line of the Steelers could overwhelm the Chiefs, and I know that they played earlier this year, and the Chiefs fans are going to be commenting. They beat them by like 26 or whatever it was. Yeah, but you never know the second time. The Steelers, like they're a defense. They led the league in sacks, I think. They can get after you, and if they play a solid coverage plan in the back end, you're not going to try to man up Tyreek Hill. Just play, those zone coverages, force Mahomes to get off his first read, and then hope your pass rush gets there by the second read. And then offensively, I will say this about their offense. What they do quite often is Ben just throws fades down the field. And the Bengals did do that for a lot of the game. So if the Chiefs are going to try to just go blitz this old man all day, maybe Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson got a few big plays, up their sleeve, and Ben's just going to go throwback edition, and they're going to go out there and put up a few scores. I'm not saying they're going to put up 30, but if they could get to 24 and this defense could play really well, I mean, maybe. I think it's a long shot, but they've like you said, they've got the experience, they've got the playmakers, and that is at least what they can say. And they've got a coach who's been there and won a Super Bowl. So Steelers fans, we're not super high on your team, but you've got a chance.
I think what we should be talking about the most with this game is what a travesty it is that the NFL put this on Sunday Night Football. I believe it's
Why? Why though?
I don't
Why?
understand why they did that. I mean, a year ago in this new Super Wildcard weekend,
Is it Mahomes? Is that what it is?
It must be. I mean, a year ago they put Tom Brady against the Washington Football Team, which was me one of the worst games of the Wildcard weekend a year ago. It ended up being quite an interesting one with Taylor Heineke, but I just think they could have done a little bit better with that, but it is what it is. I'll be tuning in. Like I said, like you said, not much optimism at all with the Steelers, but hey, I'm not always right, and the NFL tends to surprise, so you never know. I'm not going to say there's a 0% chance, but I also said I think Mahomes has a real shot at another Lombardi.
Yeah,
this year.
You think the Chiefs are going all the way. Not even close. Nobody's stopping them. Except Tom Brady if he gets there.
It wouldn't surprise me at this point. I've seen the story too many times.
So, to end the AFC video off, if you guys want to check out our NFC analysis, we have a completely other video for that. So go check out the NFC breakdown where we break down Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and the rest of the crew in the NFC. Thomas, the people know my pick, although I really don't have a good feel for who's going to go all the way in the AFC. Who do you think is going to go all the way? Is it the Kansas City Chiefs?
I'm going to have to go with the Kansas City Chiefs.
I
have too much pride. I'm going to stick with them. I said it. I think the Super Bowl was February 7th last year. I said it February 8th.
Okay.
The Chiefs will be back, and of course I can't sway off that now. So I'm going to have to go with them. Like you, I'm not crazy confident. I think it's a very wide open year. I think a lot of teams could surprise, but I'm going to go with the safe pick, and I don't even know if it's safe. I'm going to go with the Chiefs.
I would say it's the safe pick. It's the one probably most people are making, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If there is a team that knocks them off, who do you think it will be?
I'm going to say it's going to be the Buffalo Bills.
Okay.
Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. I think we all remember Stephon Diggs staying on the field a year ago and watching the Chiefs celebrate the AFC Championship. They've spent the whole year preparing to face them in the playoffs, and I know it's been up and down, but that's been the long-term goal. Maybe they're finally ready this year. Maybe using Josh Allen every single play is a formula that works, and I just don't know it. But I would say it's the Bills. They're the most talented.
Yeah, that is my pick is the Bills. I think, and like I said earlier, they've gotta rely on Josh Allen. But if Josh Allen can be as special as I think he is, they've got the capacity to do it this year and get to the Super Bowl. Thank you guys for watching. the AFC edition. Thomas, quickly plug all your business on YouTube. Maybe focus on the YouTubes. I'll put your YouTube link in the comments as well as the description. So check out that podcast, one of my favorites.
Oh, I appreciate it, Mitch. Yeah, guys, make sure to check out the Catch the Blitz show, Catch the Blitz podcast on YouTube. Every Monday we do a show, so we'd love if you could tune in for that. Mitch, once again, thanks for having me, and good luck to your team. I know you can't say this to me because my team's once again not playing the playoffs, but good luck to your Patriots. It's a lose-lose situation for me because either way I'm going to have to watch one of my rivals win on Saturday, but good luck to you.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate that from a Fins fan. And thank you, everyone, for watching. From Thomas and Mitch, peace.